They say we should have known better than to fall so deep down into this rabbit hole we found. And I was thinking.
Hi, this is Nikolai, and you're listening to My Dad Rafal, co-host James Jardian, and featuring Mr. Jim Tiller on the one and only Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. Plug in, listen up, and enjoy.
Deep into this pool of regrettable situations. It's brought me back to the last time that we were happy.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome down the Security Rabbit Hole to another edition of the industry's longest consistently running security podcast, Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. It is a beautiful day in what I think is post-winter because it's supposed to be up in the upper 60s today. It's going to be fantastic. I'm wearing shorts because we're going hiking later today, and a t-shirt. Look at that. It's wonderful, wonderful. Good guest for you guys today, returning, but one of those that Richard, how long have we been trying to reschedule this? It's got to be years.
I think about a year and a half or so.
About a year and a half. So, okay, close.
Yeah.
All right, before we get into all that, James is back. James, welcome back.
Yeah, listen, I'm just excited as this midwinter heat wave as you are, because it's pretty nice out today here too. I mean, we went and got donuts this morning and t-shirt and shorts, and it was fine. So
it's beautiful.
I like it.
Jim, welcome.
Hey, I'll jump on the weather bandwagon. It is 60 degrees, crystal clear, blue skies. I'm going to spend the whole day twisting wrenches on cars. I'm just going to have a blast outside today. It's going to be awesome.
Richard, what's it like where you are? Not that.
It's typical Denver, Front Range, Colorado. It's cold this morning and it's going to be 60 this afternoon. But 60 here is like 75 because we get 309 days of sunshine. So best choice I ever made in my life was, forgive me, all my old Columbus friends and family. The best choice was moving to the mountains. It's even when it's not nice, it's amazing.
That's awesome. I love the helmets in the background, and you've got one heck of a studio going there, buddy.
Yeah, it's a constant upgrade cycle. I mean, look, we're in technology, right? And upgrades where it's at. So every year it's adding more pieces, and then like a lot of people know about me, my wife and I are huge music festival fans, so we just keep adding to the collection.
That's pretty awesome. I built out that behind me, and I just try to keep every time I want to add something to it, I feel like I have to take something out, and I don't know how, so I just keep adding to it. Eventually, that bookshelf's going to collapse, and we'll see what happens next. But
on the music tip, I just got to say, I like how the theme music, as the outro happens, you're starting to move into like Balkan party music, which is a really good specific genre. I kind of wanted that thing to keep going.
Yeah, it's a single song. I've had this tune for, good Lord, it's been a long time. So there's a duo in trance called, their name is Gabriel and Dresden. The song is called Deep Down, and the vocals you hear is from a lady who goes by Winter Kills, which is appropriate for Colorado. But I hit him up. It was one of my favorite songs. I was like, man, this would be perfect for the podcast. So I kept trying to message the guy because he had a Twitter account. Has a Twitter account? This has been years. And I kept sending him DMs like, one of these days he's going to see this and reply, or his publicist or somebody will. And I was like, hey, I would love to use this, the opening for a podcast I run. And so it's kind of a passion of mine. And I was sitting on my couch one Saturday. I remember the day. I don't remember where it was. And all of a sudden I get a message back that says, that sounds awesome. Do it. And I was like, what? And then another message came and basically said, send me a link. I was like, what? So I sent it. Josh Gabriel liked the intro apparently. And so that's how I'm never changing it. It's there forever. I love this. I love the tune. I love the kind of we go down the rabbit hole. And it's a
Well,
lot
now
of fun.
there's also like 200 people Googling Balkan party music. They're like, I've never heard
That
of
there
that.
are, yeah. Well, if iTunes is correct, there's at least 5,000. So we'll see, or maybe 200 for this one once we get to Balkan party music. All right. Well, hey, speaking of being famous, and you have a book, and I love the title, and I want you to talk about it because that was the original intent of getting you on this show, to talk about this topic, which is so near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, I did. Well, so look, we talked about this when I sent you the note prior to publishing. The podcast is mentioned in the book specifically around the notion that there's this confluence, there's this intersection between these really interesting personas, right? There are personalities, there are celebrities, there are experts, there are influencers. Like, what's the difference between them? And that wasn't really the genesis of the book for me. But in the case of the podcast, I point out, look, you've invested a lot of time, resources, and money into this podcast. It took you quite a while to get to a point where you had the numbers, it substantiated, all the different business aspects of this thing. Yeah. And, people look at me and they go, well, I'm going to start a podcast. And I'm like, really? Like, how long do you think your ramp is going to be before anybody is listening to it? Right. Yeah. There's like this disconnect between kind of that microwave, of an instant gratification culture, which we've always been guilty of. I mean, it's just not a digital thing. But people who are like, I've got something important to say and I want to say it. And I think there are tons of people. That's actually the premise of the book. I think there are a lot of people who have a lot of really cool things to share. And the channels and the methods to do it are mysteries to folks. Like, so in the security industry, it wasn't a security book. It was like, the famous with 12 people. And the subtitle actually has a very specific meaning to it, a career guide on how to be an internationally recognized expert in something that nobody cares about. And it's because when I started on this journey about 8 years or so ago, when I was working with Jim, when I started on this journey, I started speaking publicly for the first time as a part of my profession. Yeah. And I had people coming up to me at conferences going, I've never heard anybody speak like you before. And I was like, well, this is just who I am. Like, I don't change gears. I don't have a stage persona. And, and I'm a contrarian and I call BS when I see BS. And it resonated with a small population. That small population continued to grow and grow and grow. And then I start meeting other people in the security industry. Chris Roberts, Brian Krebs, Bruce Schneier, Eve Mailer, John Kindervag, this laundry list. And we're all comparing notes about how weird this life is of being recognized. Like walking down the street in San Francisco at RSA, I had people yelling at me one time, hey, where's the bow tie? And I didn't know who these people were. And I was like, the bow tie was a shtick, a gimmick for the first couple of years of doing this. So the whole idea behind the book was, how do you create a personal brand? How do you federate a personal brand to a professional brand or a corporate brand? If you're not, in the corporate world, you're the world's best knitter, right? How do you find channels into media? How do you find channels into speaking engagements? How do you network? What's the power of serendipity? Which is a premise that my very first startup taught me when I went to work for Andre Durand at Ping Identity. And I said, Andre, why would you hire me? Like, you got this crew, you guys are pre-IPO. Like, why would you give me, a stake in the company and bring me on board? And he goes, because you meet certain people at certain times and they're the right person for what you need to get done. And I was like, that's the story of our entire lives. It's just that we miss those signals, right? When we're, crossing paths with people and we're faced with these choices. One last point that I'll make about this is that how ubiquitous this world of influencers and experts, and they're all around us. I was on a flight a couple of years ago, business class upgrade, and I'm sitting next to a guy, and we start talking, and he goes, I said, what do you do? I'm in cybersecurity, blah, blah, blah. I don't expect anybody to know my domain, right? And I go, what do you do? And he goes, oh, I'm a stuntman. And I'm like, that is cool. Like, you're a stuntman, right? Like, we start talking about movies and everything, and I'm an enormous movie fan. And I've never heard of this guy. And of course, I get off the plane and I'm immediately walking down the concourse and I'm Googling this guy's name. He's not a stuntman. He's the stuntman. He's the guy that trains all the other stunt people around the world. And he has thousands of followers, right? And I'm sitting next to this guy having this really neat human experiential moment with him. And I don't even know, right? I don't even know that this guy is a massive influence, has probably had an impact on many things that I've seen. So that's when I started diving down this rabbit hole. I started seeing the value in helping people do that and find ways to have their voice heard. And then I actually want to segue in this because you said it as we were kind of in the green room on this subject. I'd like to segue into and have you guys start on your feelings about influencer culture, because I address it in the book, but I also had to change my own thinking about it. And my editor was the one that caused me to change my thinking about it. So influencer culture, where do you guys sit on this?
Who are you pointing at, Raph? I don't know which way your screen's laid out.
All right, I'll start because I both grew up in the industry in this, and then I'll say fell victim to its ways. So look, back when, I mean, this is early 2000s. We were all trying to become important, and I started writing and started getting recognized. I got on the speaking circuit, and kind of like you, right? I had a thing where for a while, I could not walk down RSA or Black Hat without somebody yelling my Twitter handle. They didn't really know my name. They'd yell my Twitter handle and I'd be like, "Hey, good to see you." And I'd be like, "Hey, dude." Like I'm terrible with one of those things is that personal flaws is that I'm so bad with getting people's names and named in a face. Like I'll remember your face forever, but I'll have no idea what your name is. I'll forget 10 seconds after you tell me. And I've tried and it just doesn't, my brain just doesn't do that. But it was weird because, it started from a place of like a job asked me because I happened to be the guy that could go up and talk about things and make them relevant, into like, hey, it'd be really cool to be like famous. Right. And then you realize, no, this really sucks. it's not as cool. That's probably why the master stuntman there was just kind of humble, because like after a while, I think it just starts to suck. Because I was traversing the world and hitting conferences and speaking and microphone in front of me for media and stuff, and it was exhausting. And as soon as you get to a point where you're recognizable, there's no shortage of people that will come after you for reasons sometimes completely of their own making, to tear you down, to tell you why you don't know what you're talking about, and to then dig into your personal life and try to make that reasons why you should be there. Like that all got to be too much. Like I was just done, and so I bailed. When we started working together, Richard, that was about the time I was like done, pulled the ripcord, jumped out of the plane, became like invisible for a while. And it was just nice working in the back office for a bit, for the good number of years. So, and I've seen influencers come and go. I like whenever somebody says influencer now, I think of the ones that you see on social media, on the Instagram, on the TikToks, on the people that are just, to me, it signals what it's become is this fake persona that you put out for people to try to smile and dance and talk, and then you go back to your sad life afterwards, right? That's all the memes we've seen. I don't know if that's true. I mean, obviously that's not true universally, but I think that influencer it can't be, I'll tell you what though, it can't be built like inorganically. You are either somebody people trust, at least in our industry, or you're not, right? You're not going to suddenly get famous and people are like, oh, I'm going to trust that guy. Like that may work for kids and cosmetics and golf clubs and crap like that, but it doesn't work in the way you think it does in our industry. That's a lot to say, but I'll stop. I
think you see a lot though in our industry, a lot of, and I don't even know what I would qualify as influencers, to be honest, but people that are well known in the industry. I don't even know if I want to call them influencers, but I mean, people that I don't see necessarily that are going around maybe presenting at cons and doing that. I don't see them as influencers, but I don't have a good definition of that. But I feel like there's a lot of grouping, right? That maybe you are this influencer or you're well known in this group or this circuit, but you step out of that bubble and not a person knows you, know, and it's a really interesting thing. I mean, when I've gone to different jobs before, you walk in, and I spent time working with SANS. I used to teach for SANS. I used to do presentations, across the country and, all that stuff. And, so I knew a lot of people from that, those groups, that right? Bubble. Like you go to DerbyCon, right? Like, all the key players.
Yep.
And then you walk into an organization and not a single person in security could name any of the, like you name somebody and they're like, I don't know who that is, and it's like, an interesting phenomenon because you're like, wow, like in this world, they are like on this pedestal of sorts. And then you step outside of that bubble and they don't even exist, and that's an interesting thing to me that, really blows my mind. You're like, how is it that they can be like, so like on top of things and, like they are experts in a lot of these domains, but yet people that work in those domains, because they're not in that, kind of world, don't like, they just have no idea, no concept, that stuff exists.
Well, and Jim, before you go, that's the entire basis of the title, an expert in something that nobody cares about. It's actually basically a statistical reality. Like there are thousands of people that know who I am out of a world population of billions. Right. It's like, there's that threshold where you cross a celebrity where it's not, now it's not, a small population that knows you, but there's just thousands and thousands of niche expertises that are super fascinating to me because there are experts in all of them. And then you go to talk to somebody and somebody is like, a groupie of somebody and you're like, I don't even know what that field is. Like where does that come from?
That's what it feels like. It feels like groupies almost, right? Like you get in those situations and, you name those people and it's like, there's a group that knows them and it's tight, they're going to the same cons, they're going to all the same stuff. But then, it almost feels like the people that are out working their regular jobs that don't go to cons, that don't have no idea. And that seems much more a majority than the small bit that's actually going to all that stuff. Right. I mean, I don't know. It's just kind of interesting.
And speaking of celebrities, I'd like to point out, you mentioned DerbyCon, which it continues to prove my theory that it is impossible to have a podcast or a webinar without some kind of transparent or opaque reference to Dave Kennedy. So,
but you know what? I bet I can go into work. You know what? I bet I can go into work tomorrow and ask anybody there if they know who Dave Kennedy is, and I bet maybe one might say yes.
Probably.
You know what I mean? Like that. Yeah. That's the reality of it. And you live in that world. I mean, he puts on. He put on DerbyCon. I mean, very well known. Speaks on national TV, all that stuff, and still.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's amazing to walk into like the corporate world and it's like, who's that? I don't know who that is.
Jim, thoughts on this all?
Well, I've been trying to organize my thoughts because I was thinking about it a lot when we knew this was going to be the topic. And I would say is that, like when I think about you, Richard, is you've been through all the hard knocks. I mean, Raph, James, you came from a time where, you had to get your hands dirty. You had to figure it out. You had to kind of take a hard road. And then people are like, man, you're really good to be able to share information. Can you talk about that? Can you write about that? And so it was the expression of skill, capability, and knowledge, and God forbid, wisdom. And people gravitated to that. And I think the modern influential culture is they're really good at talking about it. They're engaging, but that doesn't come from always a position of experience, right? And I think there is a teeter-totter there. So to me, the word influencer means it's almost like the Kardashian effect. You're famous for being famous, right? And so I keep saying I'm famous, and pretty soon you'll believe me I'm famous. And if I show up on enough things and I go to enough conferences that, enough people stand around me or whoever, and I think to me, it's kind of gotten a little bit, self-indulgent maybe in some cases. Yeah, a little hokey. I'll listen to influencers today and they'll be talking about something relatively complex. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'm listening. And then it's something, they'll say something, or they'll become surprised by something that's extremely fundamental. Like, for example, it's a car expert and they're talking about engines and they're like, oh, and you know what? There's a throttle pedal. Wait, what is that? And you're like, wait a second, hold on. You can't be an expert if you don't know what a pedal is in a car, right? Yeah. That kind of thing. And so I'm always trying to stay optimistic in these kind of things. For me, it was that teeter-totter point when I was at Black Hat. It's like, I don't know, 2005, I think. And people are coming up to me. I was there with Bruce, as a matter of fact. And people are coming to me and asking me to sign a book and take pictures with me. And I thought, oh, this is great and kind of weird at the same time. But then I was like, I didn't want to do that. It was a very strange time for me. I was like, do I go speak or do I stay busy and putting things together and that kind of stuff? And I think the word influencer carries a bad connotation. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but for me, it carries that identity with it as opposed to
same here.
Your respect score goes down when your title in LinkedIn has influencer in it. I mean,
or
to be 100% honest,
or something, right?
I mean, all right, easy on the evangelists out there, but yes.
You know what? I was thinking about that though, like the difference. What's the difference between evangelist and an influencer? Because I mean, years and years and years ago, I interviewed at Microsoft for an evangelist position, right? And at that time, I mean, it was you're out doing public speaking, but you were doing very technical, working with development teams, really showing them how to do stuff. And now, I think to your point, Jim, before, and I don't know if I'd call like David Kennedy and, the groups that were coming up with stuff like that, like influencers. I don't know, we looked at it that way. But if you look at that era and then you start moving into more of the modern times, right? I think to your point, people were very technical. They were hands-on. They were doing this stuff. And now I feel like a lot of people that are influencers, even if you go look at their profile, right? Like maybe they were in corporate for a little bit, but I get that feeling they didn't do well in corporate. It was like, I can't really do it. Those that can't teach. And I didn't really do that well. So you know what? I'm going to go talk high level theory and I'll spit these great ideas and I'll get that stuff out there and people will listen to me. I'll be a loud voice, but sit me down at the desk and say, hey, actually help secure our company. And that's not happening, right? Like they're less the hands-on, but I think to the point of, you get a lot of people that can talk at a high level to maybe get interaction and get engagement. That do you need to know? This is always the question. Do I need to know there's a throttle piece on there, for what I'm talking to? One of the things I always struggled with for presentations, I had tons of ideas for presentations back in the day. Like I was going to do one on view state and how it's encoded base 64, all this stuff. And then I'm like, that's stupid. Everybody knows this. And I kid you not, like 2 months later, somebody went and did a presentation on it. It was all in the news. It was all this stuff. And I'm like, everybody knows this, but everybody doesn't know it.
That's
right. And that's where you get into do I need to be super technical? Do I get the right information out there that's necessary, right, to move the needle? And, how depth do I need to be for that role, right, of influencer?
Richard, when you talk about this topic, do you also envision like those terms rock star, evangelist, influencer, snake oil salesman, right? Like, all these things I because you get to it depends on the context, right? Because you get into these, James was hitting it kind of perfect. You get into these situations where there is a definite, undeniable need for somebody that can take really tough, difficult concepts and convert them to things that I can understand, right? In my profession or in my daily life. There are these people in finance. There's these people in everything, right? You find them in church. You find them at work. There are these people that simply look at like hey, let me take options trading and distill it down into something an 8-year-old could understand. That would be like that would be seen like as an influencer. But that's somebody that isn't necessarily like doesn't have to be super technical. It's that translation piece that's important to me.
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot to unpack.
Go.
I'll start by saying I wrote a chapter about the difference between influencers and experts and personalities.
Okay.
And it is the only chapter that my editor, Carrie, came back and said, I love the entire book. This chapter is entirely wrong. And that's really, if you've had the experience of writing a book, that's tough. That your baby's getting called ugly, right? And she said, I want you to consider something. And she said, are you mad about the influencer title, or are you mad about something else? And that got me to thinking. And the thinking led to an entirely different chapter. So I'm going to use some examples here and Jim, I'm going to pick on you because based upon the color of our facial hair, we are the closest in respective age to each other. How many channels did we have when we were kids? TV channels?
4. I had 4. You had 3.
You had 4? You had VHF or UHF? You had
it was
5.
all antennas.
5. There we go.
When you talk about bands, yes.
Yeah. I grew up on the lake. My distribution access was 3 channels with a coat hanger antenna with tinfoil on it, and no knobs on the TV because my dad wouldn't fix it, so you had to use pliers, right? And this was my distribution network, and it got really wild when we figured out how to strap an antenna outside and get the Dr. Demento coming out of Cleveland, right?
Okay,
there you go.
That's a good reference. That is a good Saturday night. Saturday night or
good.
Friday night? Saturday night.
I think it was Friday night. I think Saturday night was the Ghoul. Yeah, the Ghoul was
late, like 11 p.m. on a Friday night. Dr. Demento. Wow. Okay. If you don't, by the way, guys, if you're listening and you don't know that reference, please do yourself a favor and go look up the history. It's brilliant. I think they've got back, like it's archived somewhere.
Oh yeah, you can definitely pull them up, right? But think about this for the entire. I mean, I remember in the early '80s, I dated a girl specifically because she had cable in the next town over, right? Because they were the first town to have cable. Like I hope she's not listening. I doubt she is. But
you never know.
Think about how distribution from a media and entertainment standpoint began to change the world in the 80s with the arrival of commercial internet or commercial cable. And then you kind of roll forward through the early 2000s, like you're talking about, and then into where we're at now. And the reality is, and I'll just toss this out there as a kind of a challenge. The way that influencer as a word makes us feel emotionally, first of all, is very personal for all of us.
Yeah.
And second, we don't hate the influencer. We hate the influencer distribution network. The entire distribution network's been democratized. So anybody with no talent can post up a TikTok, and people will watch it. And so, as I went through this with my editor, she said, the one thing that you're missing is that an influencer, whether they're the influencer you like or you don't understand, or it's just not in your generation, they represent a value to somebody. And I was like, wow, like, why am I being so judgmental about somebody taking their creative talents, their knowledge, their wisdom, their at a minimum, their ability to put aside their own fears and anxieties and do something stupid, in a dance move on TikTok. Why am I sitting in that seat going, that's just dumb, right? In the meantime, there have been influencers throughout our entire lives. There's been influencers throughout the course of history. Like my first big influencer, and it's in the book, my first big influencer was Captain Kangaroo, right? Like he, Lamb Chop influenced a lot of, my childhood. Big Bird, right?
Wow.
We have influence all around us. And what I think is really weird is if you don't like that particular person's channel, switch it. Like if you and then if you're criticizing, but you're actually not participating in that influencer's ecosystem, what exactly are you criticizing? Like you're not even really, a good critic because you're not following or watching them. But on the expert side, I think this is really important. I love the translation piece, right? I mentioned Schneier. I've met Bruce a couple of times on the conference circuit. There's no doubt in this world that Bruce Schneier is the encryption god. Right.
Yeah.
Like he teaches at Harvard. Like the man is just, and I don't follow him because by the time I'm reading the third thing that comes from him, I don't understand what he means. Right. He's in a different universe and planet from me. He can't translate that. So, his expertise is precise. It's valuable. It's important, but it doesn't speak to me. So, from a security standpoint, does that make me less of a security person because I don't follow Bruce? No, not really, because there's so much diversity within security that, I mean, as you guys know, I planted my first flag in identity, right?
Yep.
And the last thing I kind of want to loop back around on influencers and experts was the point that you made, Ralph, when if you're going to intentionally try and put yourself out there, doesn't mean you're going to be successful influencing, doesn't mean you're going to be successful being anointed, because you do not self-anoint yourself as an expert, being anointed by the market that you're an expert. You have to have a thick skin, right? And that skin has to get thicker and thicker and thicker. And I remember I was at a conference. It's the old No conference, which was the business side of identity. And I walked in, there was a speaker that I wanted to see. They were talking about disenfranchisement of people around the world because, so many billions of people don't have access to digital, and, their identities don't exist in the digital world. And I was super excited to go meet this person. And I like to say they were an unwashed zealot for self-sovereign identity. Right. And I walked up and I started talking to this person. I said, "Hey, I just loved the presentation and everything." And I said, "I'm with you. Like, there's going to be 1 billion people on this planet that aren't going to be able to authenticate themselves." And then she started asking me questions, and she goes, "What do you think authentication means?" And I, spooled out the, standard answer for what authentication is, right? The ability to prove that you are who you say you are, right? At its very core. And she goes, "You don't know what you're talking about. That's not authentication." I've never pulled rank in my life, right? In these conversations, you have to grow a very large humility reflex in a lot of these discussions. But in that particular case, I did. I said, "I'm sorry, my authentication definition is wrong." I said, "Do you know you're talking to the guy that built the largest identity function on the planet that wasn't surpassed in scale or numbers until about 2021? I said, "We don't have anything in common." And I was like, how do you stand there and tell somebody in your same, domain and same area of expertise that they're an idiot and they're wrong? But the reality is that's the mechanics of human beings. It has nothing to do with knowledge base and wisdom. We're all pretty petty little creatures, right? If we don't put that in check. But it's, I learned from that example, and the one that I put in the book that got me off of Facebook was I was doing a lot of media quotes in 2016, 2020 around election security. And I happen to be one of the few cybersecurity people that was actually an elected official once in their lives. I've actually worked in, the board of elections and worked in counting rooms and everything.
Well, that's interesting.
And I actually posted up
I did not know that.
a note. Yeah, I posted up a note about, hey, I was in the San Francisco Chronicle, this, that, and the other on Facebook, and all of these people started piling in. Somebody actually called me a member of the agitprop. And I was like, "I'm sorry, like a Cold War term. You're saying that I'm a propagandist? Like, I'm telling you from experience and knowledge and expertise." And it was so disheartening to me that people that have never been asked their opinion, let alone asked by media, what they thought about election security, were all of a sudden election security experts and just crushing my soul, right? I left Facebook because I was like, my professional, it's not my job to educate the rest of the world about security. And if you try to do so, you open yourself up to an audience that will not be as receptive as the audience of the community that you are part of, right? And it's tricky. It's really tricky to balance that.
Well, I have that thick skin comment. I have a great quote that somebody left me with once, and that is, never take insults from somebody you wouldn't take advice from.
That's excellent.
That's a solid piece of advice.
Right? Because there are lots of people who will tell you, you don't know what you're talking about, you're dumb, you smell funny, you're funny looking, and nobody cares what you think. And you're like, does anybody, by the way, you're a pseudonym, don't even have the courage to use your own name. And to call me out, and you won't do it in person because you like to hide behind the anonymity of a dark room with a computer, right? So, like, maybe I don't care what you think, but that was one of the hardest things for me, was meeting other people out there on the circuit. Some of them I just, I would get lumped in with as an expert. And these people are now like that guy below me, Mr. Jim over here. Like, we're not on the same level. Are you kidding me? Like, I didn't write any books. I wasn't, I'm not like, I knew how to translate things. That was my superpower. I wasn't particularly smart. I just knew how to translate difficult concepts into something that people could understand. And it was really tough to, I don't know if it's imposter syndrome or what, but really tough to stand up there and be like, yes, I'm getting paid to go essentially, be an evangelist, if you trigger you, James, to be one of those. Right. But you feel like I don't belong here. And every day you're like, all right, I gotta do something that makes me feel like I belong in this spot. Like I'm earning this. And, but it would drive me nuts to look at, see others that particularly in our, I'll speak from our industry, we're famous for being famous, or we're famous for doing something categorically stupid. We all remember we talked about it, James. I can't remember what episode it was, but the hacking the Jeep driving down the highway, right? The making the plane fly sideways. Like, what the hell are you doing? Well, but that's how you got famous. And it's like, I don't want to be that kind of famous. Like, I don't want the FBI.
It's an interesting thing, Raf, to that point, right? About the security industry is you find one thing. All you have to do is one thing, and now you are the influencer. It doesn't matter if you know anything about anything after that. Like, oh, I discovered X, and it's like, wow, I'm going to that person, for everything. And it's like, but they don't know that's, you know what I mean? But once you're in, and it, that never changes. I think.
Well, I challenge that a little bit, because the one thing that's interesting about influencer culture, and I'm kind of the big general banner, not specific to pop culture or just the general banner, is one hit wonders exist in every industry, right? We talked a little bit about music before. Like, one hit wonder is like, everybody remembers a song, nobody remembers the artist. And so when you get these, especially kind of the hacker kitties and script kitties and everybody that are doing, cool stuff as a side hustle when they got a corporate job and they're posting up that they hacked whatever. It is the equivalent of a one hit wonder, because this relationship that you have with a community of people is at its very core still dependent upon value delivery, right? So the people that have the longest legs in security relative to their reputations and it being a personality or an influencer in the market are the people that have perpetually delivered value, right? And they're the people that those numbers continue to increase and increase and increase. I'll use Chris Roberts as a great example of this, right? Chris's numbers, like if you, the other thing that you do, kind of get into is the analysis of all the numbers and SEO and all this kind of stuff. If you're really serious about it, Chris's numbers are stupid when it comes to his visibility in the community. And what I love about Chris, and full transparency, he's in the book because he put up this really interesting LinkedIn piece about how doing free speaking engagements cost him about $25,000 a year, right? Personally, right? But a lot of what Chris puts up is life lessons, right? Like in the security industry, he's talking about, mountain biking and crashing, and the most soul crushing one that he put up, because Chris and I are both Great Dane owners, right? When his Great Danes passed away, like, and that is valuable to people, and it's valuable to people in our industry, right? Because when we think about this notion that, work-life balance or, work-life imbalance or whatever the case is, like Chris has been operating at the highest level as a CISO, supersonic jet companies and all the other cool shit that he's done. And yet he's trying to figure out how to maintain that balance in life. And so that value delivery has resulted in numbers that are astronomical for anybody in security in that social media side. And so you have to continue to deliver value to be relevant in the marketplace. More importantly, if you don't continue to deliver value, then your credibility score that intellectual or that emotional credibility score of the people that are following you just kind of tapers off and drifts away. And, so the flash and the pans are kind of interesting to me because I always think they're highlighting some interesting things that maybe us old folks should be paying attention to. But I don't think it's a way to build a sustainable personal brand.
I think there's two components to that, Richard. So, we've been out of time for a bit, but that's okay. It's my show. I can do whatever I want. I think there's two parts to this, right? You've got the value delivery piece, which I agree. Like and it has to be continuous. It can't be like you delivered value 10 years ago, right? The part that makes that, even if it was just 10 years ago, still relevant is relatability to me. That's the piece. So there's two dimensions here. Are you relatable? And do you deliver some sort of intellectual value? Because there are people that are very relatable that deliver very little value, but I'll still stick around with. There are people that deliver lots of value, but I can't relate to, that I'll look at every once in a while. They're a bookmark somewhere, right? That I'll go back to every once in a while. But you think about if you're going to to a conference or something, who do you go see? Sometimes about half the time I think for me it would be the novel, like something I've never seen before. And then the rest of the time includes HallCon, includes dinner and drinks and all that, is people that like are relevant to me that I learned something from, but also I want to hang out with, are personable, are I can relate to. They're just good human beings, right? Not necessarily the people that carry a pod of groupies around with them, because that's not fun. Not for us anyway. For the normal people that are trying to hang out with them. What do you think?
Where I'm at on that is I'm in the same place, right? I'll go out of my way to go see someone that is extremely valuable to me personally, right? I will drop whatever I'm doing. And there's a reason for my egregious name dropping. I'm hoping that people are listening to this and watching this and go, you mentioned a name I've never heard before, right? Helen Patton, right? Helen and I have known each other for years and years and years. I will drop whatever I'm doing at any conference to go see her session, right? Because I know I'm going to get value out of every single time I see it. This is somebody that I can text. Like, this is somebody that I can call up. I can invite her to come over to my house when she comes in from Columbus. And yet, the opportunity to see her live in that moment is
valuable.
It makes me eager to go see her. The relatability thing is what I want to come back around to, because Helen is highly relatable. I think it's because she's Australian and she cusses a lot. But I'm in the same boat as you are, Rafa, where my strength was I was good as a practitioner. I'm still good as a practitioner, right? I'm not an expert as a practitioner, but what I'm really good at is taking what my old man taught me. My dad was a charter fishing guide on Lake Erie, and I went to work for him when I was 12 years old. And for more than a decade, I went on a fishing trip every day for 120 to 130 days every year with 6 new customers every year. My dad was the best storyteller I've ever met in my life. And I inherited that gift. And the ability to tell a story, I go deep in this on the book, like, the speaking style, the speaking capabilities of people are often encouraged by professional speakers to say, go tell stories. And I'm like, you have to tell stories that are relevant. You have to tell stories. Like, if you're telling people about the great vacation that you took in Croatia and you're in a room full of people that are, scraping to get by, you're not going to resonate. Like, you're not, so this relatability is really the key piece. And you can be relatable at the abstraction level, telling, crazy stories about, whatever adventure you went on. I'm pretty good at that. But you can be good at really relatable specification level stories as well. And I think that there's a diversity of capabilities across that spectrum, and they're appealing to all kinds of different people. And that's why I get back to the point where, look, if somebody's not your cup of tea, don't follow them, right? But don't invalidate the value that they may be delivering to somebody else, and don't make the mistake of thinking that they're doing it at no cost to themselves. You have to invest. It may be monetary, it may be emotional, it may be, any number of things that you have to do to put yourself out there. But I respect that. And that's why my attitude about, influencers of every type have changed, except for the ones that are, the kind of folks that are, really poisoning things. It's a good kind of tie off point. My son and I are going to be speaking at RSA. And actually my book was a facilitator for the conversation between my son and I. He's a thesis defense away from his doctorate in psychology. He actually counsels adolescents, and he specializes in the impact of the digital on self-image for kids. And he works with parents on how to, modify or moderate the use of digital, what kids should be allowed to get into and not allowed to get into. And this was all precipitated from, his and my conversation around, like, here's what you have to do to put yourself out there. And that turned into a conversation about folks like Andrew Tate, and some other folks. And then I was like, what kind of things, are these influencers creating, for not as adults, we go, that stuff's stupid. Right. But as kids, these kids are soaking it up. And, so I think that this journey that I've been on around this whole influencer expert thing, it's not done yet. And while it manifested itself as a book that's meant to be a practical field guide for personal brand management, it's opened up a lot of things for me to think about in security and our responsibilities and our good stewardship. So hopefully we'll pay attention to those things. But I think it starts with conversations like these, right? Like, let's talk about how important our influence is, and let's talk about wielding it in a way that's valuable to people.
I love it. It's a great place to start the next conversation and end this one because we're just a little bit over 30 minutes. Thanks for giving us some time on a Saturday morning and spending some time with us, man.
No, I'm happy to do it. This is we only move forward if we have really good conversations. That's just universal. So
fair point. I will definitely. Well, I can't say definitely. I will endeavor to see you at RSA. My calendar is much like yours in days past. No longer my own when I go to these events. It's usually managed by a team of people that we just like. Okay, I need to be here. Where I just need. Like, we need to get, speaking of RSA, one final thought. Like, that conference either needs to move, it just needs to move, or we need to figure out how to like schedule add distance, travel distance to schedules. Cause I cannot end one meeting at the bottom of the hour and be in another one a minute later when they are a half a mile apart. It's just like teleportation just isn't a thing yet. So anyway.
Well, okay. Logistically, I'm just going to, like I said, I call BS when I see it. Logistically, I'm just going to call out RSA, right? Because now, for the last few years, they have been locking down and locking out all properties around the Moscone, which means that, to your point, that if you just want to go have a sit down with somebody, you got to roll all the way out to the Embarcadero, and then try and get back. And logistically, the San Francisco location obviously is a challenge anymore. And then the mechanics around how they're managing the event just makes it incredibly difficult for it to be the high value event that it used to be. Yeah.
Yep. Anyway. All right, Richard, thank you for being with us. Jim, James,
cool.
Guys, always great to see you. And
great to see you, Richard.
Guys, it's been
fun.
Hanging out. Thanks for listening. And we will catch you guys on another Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast in the near future. Check us out on LinkedIn and where we can be influencers. No, check us out on LinkedIn. Subscribe to the RSS feed. Become one of our 5,000 plus iTunes subscribers as we look to grow this thing and influence the way people think through some good content like this. So we'll catch you guys another time, another place, on another Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. Ciao, y'all.
This is Bella. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to leave my dad a review and share this with your friends. Bye.